In a decision that reverberated through the halls of Washington and sent shockwaves across the nation, as well as global markets, the Supreme Court has struck down a key pillar of former President Donald J. Trump's economic policy, marking a turning point in the way America approaches international trade. The ruling dismantles the broad tariff structure that was enacted under the guise of national security, fundamentally challenging the extent of presidential power in shaping international trade agreements and policies. The court's decision has ignited fierce debate and created a wave of uncertainty for American businesses, consumers, and international partners, who now face a rapidly changing landscape. At the heart of the case was not the wisdom or effectiveness of the tariffs themselves, but the authority used to impose them, specifically, Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, a law originally designed during the Cold War era. Critics have long argued that this decades-old law was stretched far beyond its original intent, being used to justify tariffs on a wide range of products, from steel and aluminum to everyday consumer goods, impacting industries and households alike. The Supreme Court's decision now raises a fundamental question. Can a president unilaterally reshape America's trade relationships without explicit approval from Congress? Or should such sweeping decisions require broader, legislative oversight? The sudden invalidation of these tariffs has thrown supply chains into disarray, forcing businesses to recalculate strategies overnight, and leaving many companies scrambling to adapt to new rules and shifting costs. For many, the uncertainty is palpable, as companies large and small try to anticipate the next moves in a rapidly evolving trade environment. The debate over who truly controls American trade policy, the president or Congress, has now reached a fever pitch, setting the stage for further legal and political battles that could redefine the nation's economic future. Trump's tariff plan was a signature of his America First agenda, aiming to reduce the trade deficit and protect domestic industries. Beginning in 2018, the administration imposed sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum, citing Section 232's national security justification. The plan quickly expanded, targeting hundreds of billions in Chinese imports under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. This sparked a tit-for-tat trade war, disrupting global commerce and creating economic uncertainty. The tariffs affected everything from industrial components to consumer goods, raising costs across the U.S. economy. While some domestic producers benefited, many manufacturers faced higher input costs, often passed on to consumers. Supporters argued these measures were necessary to level the playing field and force concessions from trading partners. The administration framed the economic pain as a short-term cost for long-term strategic gains. The legal challenge to Trump's tariffs centered on two arguments: the overreach of national security and the non-delegation doctrine. Plaintiffs argued Section 232 was never meant for broad economic competition with allies, but for genuine emergencies. The government countered that national security was intentionally broad, giving the president flexibility to protect critical industries. Plaintiffs claimed the law lacked an intelligible principle, giving the executive a blank check over tariffs. Power reserved for Congress. The government warned that limiting this authority could undermine the president's ability to respond to future crises. The Supreme Court was asked to decide just how far presidential power could go in setting trade policy. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled the broad use of Section 232 exceeded the authority Congress granted. The majority opinion, by Chief Justice Roberts, focused on narrowing the definition of national security in trade. The court established a stricter standard for what counts as a legitimate national security threat. This decision reasserts Congress's primacy in setting trade policy, curbing the recent expansion of presidential power. The ruling invalidates tariffs on steel, aluminum, and other goods imposed under Section 232, forcing a rapid unwinding of these measures. Future tariffs under this law will require a direct, credible link to a specific national security threat. However, the decision leaves tariffs imposed under other statutes, like Section 301, intact for now. The result is a partially dismantled tariff regime and a new legal standard for executive action in trade. Chief Justice Roberts' opinion emphasized that the definition of national security in the Trade Expansion Act is intentionally broad, allowing the government some flexibility to respond to threats. However, he made it clear that this power is not limitless, and that there must be meaningful boundaries to prevent abuse. The court recognized that while national security is a vital concern, it cannot be used as a catch-all justification for any executive action, especially when it comes to trade policy. The court found that the connection between imported steel from allied nations and genuine U.S. security interests was simply too weak to justify such drastic action as imposing sweeping tariffs. The justices noted that economic competition, even from friendly countries, does not automatically equate to a threat to national defense. This distinction was crucial in their reasoning. The majority established a new, more rigorous test. Tariffs imposed under Section 232 must have a direct and plausible connection to actual defense or emergency needs, not just serve as a tool for economic protectionism. This means that future administrations will need to provide clear, evidence-based justifications for such measures, rather than relying on vague or speculative threats. The opinion strongly warned that unchecked executive discretion would effectively allow the president, rather than Congress, to set the nation's tariff policy. This would undermine the constitutional separation of powers, shifting too much authority to the executive branch at the expense of legislative oversight. By narrowing the scope of Section 232, the court restored a crucial balance of power, ensuring that any major shifts in trade policy require either clear congressional approval or a demonstrable immediate security threat. This decision reinforces the idea that significant economic decisions should not rest on the shoulders of one branch alone. The majority's consensus crossed ideological lines, with justices from both conservative and liberal backgrounds agreeing on the fundamental importance of maintaining the separation of powers. This rare unity highlights how essential these constitutional principles are to the functioning of American democracy. The court stopped short of striking down the law entirely, but instead offered a significant course correction and a clear message. Vague national security claims will no longer be enough to justify sweeping tariffs. The ruling sets a precedent for greater accountability and transparency in future trade decisions. In dissent, Justice Gorsuch argued the majority overstepped, substituting its judgment for the executive's on national security. He maintained Section 232's open-ended language was Congress's choice, entrusting complex threats to the president. The dissent warned the new, stricter test had no basis in the statute and could tie the hands of future presidents. Gorsuch argued economic strength is a legitimate part of national security, citing history where industry was vital to defense. The dissent saw the president's determination as reasonable and deserving of deference. It cautioned that limiting executive flexibility could weaken America's response to evolving threats. Gorsuch concluded that if Congress wants to limit presidential power, it should amend the law, not rely on the courts to rewrite it. The dissent framed the ruling as judicial activism disrupting the balance between Congress and the president. The Supreme Court's decision sent shockwaves through the U.S. economy, especially in steel and aluminum. Domestic producers, once protected, now face renewed competition and falling stock prices. Some mills may scale back or close, risking job losses in revived communities. For manufacturers using steel and aluminum, the ruling means lower input costs and potentially lower consumer prices. The agricultural sector, hit by retaliatory tariffs, could see relief if foreign levies are lifted. The decision introduces new uncertainty, forcing companies to reevaluate supply chains and investments. Economists debate the net effect. While growth and consumer welfare may improve, short-term disruption is likely. The key question is how quickly trade relationships and business strategies can adapt to this new environment. The political reaction was swift and deeply polarized, instantly fueling fierce partisan battles across the country. Within hours, lawmakers and commentators took to the airwaves and social media, each side framing the decision as either a triumph or a disaster for the nation. Former President Trump condemned the ruling in strong terms, calling it a betrayal of American workers and a direct attack on his legacy. He argued that the decision would undermine American manufacturing and weaken the country's global standing, vowing to fight back through every available channel. Supporters echoed his outrage, rallying at events and online, while Democrats and some moderate Republicans praised the decision as a long-overdue victory for the rule of law and constitutional checks and balances. For them, it was a sign that no president is above the law. The ruling deepened existing divisions within the GOP, splitting pro-free trade members from the protectionist Trump wing. Some party leaders struggled to unify their message, as internal debates grew more intense in public. Some Republicans decried the decision as weakening national security and limiting the president's ability to respond to global threats, while others celebrated it as a win for the Constitution and a necessary check on executive power. The decision now puts significant pressure on Congress to clarify or reform Section 232, either by limiting or expanding presidential authority over trade. Lawmakers are being called upon to define the boundaries of executive power in a rapidly changing global economy. This debate is set to become a central issue in the upcoming elections, forcing candidates from both parties to take clear and public stances on trade, executive authority, and the future direction of American economic policy. The Supreme Court's decision didn't end the tariff debate. Instead, it moved the fight to Congress and the campaign trail, ensuring that trade policy will remain a hot-button issue for months, if not years, to come. Lawmakers now face the complex challenge of crafting a new trade framework that balances economic interests, national security, and constitutional limits. The stakes are high, and every decision will have far-reaching consequences for American workers and businesses. The future of American trade policy is now a defining political battleground, shaping not only the nation's economy, but also the very nature of its democracy and global leadership. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point in American trade and constitutional law. By narrowing national security, the court checked presidential power and reasserted Congress's authority over foreign commerce. The ruling's economic effects, market volatility, tariff unwinding, and shifting supply chains will play out over time. Politically, the decision deepens divisions and ensures trade policy remains a central national debate. The future of American trade now rests with a divided Congress, tasked with forging a new path amid uncertainty. The ruling clarifies the law's limits but leaves strategic questions unanswered. As the nation moves forward, the balance between economic protection and global trade, and who decides it, remains unresolved.